So welcome to your guide to seamless online events. We know that we are all doing a lot of online and virtual events, anywhere from a meeting to a training to an orientation to a gala. And so we're spending a lot of time virtual. And so it is really important to have a better experience and for you all to actually lead a better experience. So the way in which this training was developed based on research, books, articles, and then our own best practices. We ourselves lead a lot of webinars and provide tech support for a lot of conferences, galas, fundraisers, convening. So we're really sharing information based on our own experience and based on research and some really good articles and books and what we have learned along the way. So our goal for today is for really you to run a seamless online event and for you to really learn some tips and best practices. And we are going to model a lot of things for you. So one thing is what we call labgistics. So we want to make sure that you can learn your best. So if you have content questions, type them in to the control box, which is likely on the right-hand side of your screen. Recording, handouts, and slides will be emailed to you. So check your spam folder, your other folder, or your clutter folder. And should you need tech support, type your question right into the control panel. Ooh, just a heads up, you type in your tech support question into the same location where you typed in your city, state, and weather, which is why we had you do that. So I always think it's really important to engage your audience from the start in some sort of way so that you, the person in charge, knows that your participants know how to use the control panel. It's also really important to go over some logistics and what your goal is, okay? You always want to go over the goal because you want to make sure that people understand what is happening and what is going to be discussed or shown or taught, or what is the purpose of why folks are gathering in the virtual environment. So what we will cover today, first, strategies for how to manage technology while also focusing on engagement, how to prepare in advance. You definitely need to make sure that you are giving yourself adequate time to plan your virtual event, whether it's a gala, a fundraiser, a meeting, a convening, or a conference. And it's also really important to review the purpose and make sure what you are trying to do at your virtual gathering aligns with the platform that you are using. So I really like GoToWebinar for large webinars. I think the audio is good, and I think the screen share capabilities are good, and I like the polls, which is why we are using GoToWebinar. But if you are doing a gala or a large conference, you might use a different platform, such as Zoom or Hopin, right? You have to choose the platform that aligns with your purpose. And then there is always going to be tech issues and common pitfalls, and we will review sort of how to avoid those, okay? So a new approach, you have to be clear about your goal so everybody understands the purpose and intent. Folks are busy, and it's really important that if you are asking people to gather online, that everybody understands the why. Very important. In addition, you are the curator of the experience, okay? So you can't just shove a in-person event into a virtual event and expect it to be as good as the networking breakfast or the gala that you used to run for the last 15 years, right? You really have to think about what is it that you're going to create. And I always ask the question, which you can type in right now, what is your favorite museum? Literally, think of it right now. What is your favorite museum that you used to go to when we could go to places really easily? All right. And when you think of your favorite museum and you type it into the control panel, and I'll read off some of them. Ooh, I see the Louvre. I see the Museum of Nature and Science, right? We got a lot of folks sort of typing this in. When you think of your favorite museum, someone spent the time to make you feel a certain way. Maybe it was the way the walls were painted, or the way the art was set up, or the exhibits were set up, or there was sort of phrases on the wall, or maybe there was lighting set up a certain way, right? Someone spent that time to make you feel a certain way. Well, when you think of your virtual experience, you also have to bring that energy and design as well. Otherwise, what's going to be happening is that somebody is going to just be watching a video for 15 minutes, and you want to really create a experience for folks. Okay, so really think about that when you are crafting and creating your virtual gathering. Think about your favorite museum, and you have to think of yourself as that museum curator and bring the energy and design to the experience. And you have to have a plan. You really have to know your content in the program, and you have to have a script, okay? This ensures that there will be less issues during the actual event, okay? Because if you planned a networking breakfast for the last 20 years and it was at the same venue and it was the same day every year and you used the same caterer for the last 20 years, you worked out the issues probably the first 5 years, all right? So it's really important to make sure that with your new virtual events that you have a plan. So you need to determine your purpose. Maybe it's a retreat, maybe you're building community, maybe you're raising funds, maybe it's an orientation, maybe it's a strategy brainstorm session and it's a focus group with community leaders. You really have to determine your purpose, because in the virtual setting, you really want to make sure it is clear about what you are doing, because it's more discombobulating when you are participating in a virtual event. All right, so have a really clear purpose. And I can't tell you what the purpose is. You have to decide what the purpose of your virtual gathering is. That is really important. All right. So I'd love to hear from folks. What is the purpose of your online event? All right, launching the poll. Is it a fundraiser? Is it a meeting? Is it a networking event or a training or an orientation? I like to do polls, all right? Now, generally, I will let a poll run for 25 to 30 seconds, because I figure if somebody is going to respond, they will likely respond within the first 30 seconds. And if they're not going to respond, they have no intention of doing the poll to begin with. All right. And if there is a technical issue, which sometimes there is, or if there is somebody who has an answer, but it's not one of the above answers, they will likely share in the control panel and we will look at them. All right. So it seems I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And we have a wide variety, but mostly we have folks who are doing fundraisers, also meetings, networking events, training, and orientations. So one thing to consider is whenever you're doing an event, you want to make sure that the event aligns with the platform that you are using, all right? So right now you are in GoToWebinar. Only I can see the chats and you're seeing the screens and you're listening to my voice, but we are not seeing each other's faces. So if you were doing a networking event, GoToWebinar wouldn't align with that. But it is really good for webinars, all right? Because it has good audio. And if you don't have good audio on a webinar, people will log off immediately, all right? So for fundraisers and networking events, you usually want to be able to see people's faces, potentially. So there are other platforms that really serve that purpose. So you want to ask yourself these questions. How many people will there be? Are you teaching, lecturing, fundraising, or networking? Who will be in attendance? And do you expect a lot of engagement? What does engagement mean? Well, engagement could mean using the chat box and having everybody see the chat, right? Engagement could mean going into breakout rooms, right? Engagement could mean doing polls. So you want to ask yourselves these questions. Your platform needs to align with your audience. If you are doing a webinar and your audience has never used GoToWebinar, well, then you definitely need to provide tech support like we have today, right? I'm looking at the tech support. I'm looking at the Q&A box and I see some folks are asking how to turn on their audio. Well, if you're doing a large gathering, you're probably going to need to have tech support because the person leading the workshop or the conference, they can't lead the content and also be answering questions in the Q&A box. It's just too much, right? So you need a platform that aligns with your audience. If none of your audience has used Hop-In, well, you might not want to use that because you're likely going to get about 500 emails and questions and phone calls of how to use the platform. But if they know Zoom, then maybe that's something that you want to use. Align with your goals. I talked a little bit about this already, but if you want a lot of engagement and maybe you want to do breakout rooms, you've got to use a platform that has breakout rooms, right? Your platform must align with your engagement ideas. Here is a variety of platforms. People always ask us, what platforms should I use? And my response is, well, what are you trying to do at your event, right? If you want people to interact and you want people to be able to see each other and go into a breakout room or do spontaneous networking, well, maybe Hop-In or maybe Zoom is the right platform for you. If what you're doing is training and orientations and content focused, then maybe you want to use Zoom Webinar or GoToWebinar or GoToTraining, right? It's really important to think about what you're trying to accomplish. So I'd love to hear from folks. What platform are you using? Hop-In, GoTo, or not sure yet? And if you're not sure yet, that is totally fine, right? It takes a while to sort of determine what platform to use. I see the responses coming in, and it looks like we do have an overwhelming amount of folks using Zoom and then the not sure yet. One thing that I love about doing polls in GoTo is that I can see the percentage of people that have voted. So if you really do need to make sure that you have 100% of people voting, maybe this is tied to a grant or to a grade or to, employment, right? There's different reasons why you're doing events and meetings and trainings. Polls are great to know sort of what people feel, how they, want to respond to a question that you have, and you can see the percentage of votes. You cannot see who has voted in which way until the end of the webinar when you pull the report. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. All right, so it looks like 60% of you said Zoom, 2% of you said GoTo, and 38% of you said not sure yet. So feel free to ask questions that you have about the platforms. One of the things for the not sure yet folks is really think about what's your purpose and what do you want to do in your event. And that is how you sort of determine your platform, all right? So that's very important to think about. So you want to have a plan and structure. Regardless of what platform you are using, you need to have a plan. A detailed run of show. What is a run of show? So a run of show is basically, let's pretend your event starts at 10 a.m. All right, what is happening at 9:30? Who's logging in at 9:30 to make sure that your presenters are ready? All right, who's logging in at 9:45 to be tech support? Maybe you have some volunteers or staff, right? And then what is happening from 10 a.m. to 10:01 and 10:01 to 10:08, right? If you're doing an event and there's lots of things happening, it needs to be detailed out minute by minute, especially if you have multiple presenters and you're sharing videos and you're sharing slides. That all needs to be planned in advance, minute by minute. It can't be figured out the day of, especially if you have a large convening. There will be just too many details. So you need to make sure to plan this in advance, and you create the structure, right? This is not the networking breakfast that you did for the last 15 years at the same venue. And often with those events that you used to do for the last 15 years, people knew what to do, right? They would go and get their coffee and they would go sit down on their favorite table because they sat there for the last 15 years. Well, that is not like this in the virtual setting. So you really do have to create the structure down to the minute and try to keep it simple. Going online is discombobulating enough. Try to keep things simple, which is why I said to you, what is your purpose? All right. What is your purpose? Very important. So 2 to 3 months before the event, think about your engagement strategies. The reason I say this is your engagement strategies will help you determine your platform. If you want breakout rooms, then you don't use GoToWebinar, right? If you want polls, then you need to put your polls in advance. If you want chat box engagement, then you need to choose a platform that allows others to see the chat box. So people always say, and people did this in the chat box today, I can't see all the other chats. Well, when we do a large webinar with over 200 people, a lot of the chats are related to tech support. And sometimes people don't want to see that. So we make a decision about the platform that we use depending on what our purpose is. Spontaneous networking. You can do that in Hopin. You can also, if you have tech support and people who really know Zoom, you can do spontaneous networking in Zoom as well. And then social media. Are you live streaming your event on Facebook from Zoom, or are you using Vimeo or YouTube? Sort of what are you doing with your event? How are you engaging on social media? These are things that you want to be thinking about in advance, all right? So we'd love to hear, what engagement strategies are you using? And you might be using more than is in this poll, and that's okay. We only put 4 because we didn't want to overwhelm you, all right? But you can also feel free to type things in to the chat box. So I see coming in right now, breakout rooms, polls, chat box, and not sure yet. So one thing I want to mention as folks are sharing, that doing a virtual event, it is not TV, right? So when you're watching a show on TV, it is flawless, right? There is no delays because somebody has edited it to make sure that there are no delays. But when you're doing an event live and it's virtual, there are going to be delays because humans are not robots, all right? That's just the way it is. And you're relying on the internet. And the bandwidth of either your presenters and your attendees. So that's something that you do have to manage your expectations with. So when we do really large webinars, the polls are often slow to launch and slow to share the results. And you wouldn't know this necessarily unless you have done a ton of webinars and experienced that before. So people are sharing breakout rooms, polls, chat box, and not sure yet. And for the not sure yet folks, that is totally okay, because you need to determine your purpose, right? You have to have a plan before you decide what engagement strategies you are using. You need to know what your event is all about before you create the engagement strategies. And for the breakout room folks, it is very important, especially if you are doing a large event, to have somebody managing the breakout rooms. So we often assist with large galas and fundraisers and convenings and meetings and conferences, and we will help with the breakout rooms and managing them, right? Because as one person, you can in no way send 500 people to a breakout room by yourself and also lead the content. It's just too hard. So 2 weeks to a month before the event, it's great to hold a tech dress rehearsal. This is where you would have speakers practice and maybe give them feedback, right? If they're sitting in front of a window and it is too bright, maybe you would tell them to move and sit somewhere else in the room, right? Potentially. Or if their audio is terrible, maybe you would tell them, I don't think you should be using that headset. I think you should maybe use a USB microphone, or maybe use your computer audio. Or if their face is not going to be seen, you hear a lot of times about people going into a closet because it has better audio, right? We are hearing podcasters are doing that all the time. So that's something to think about, right? You want to do an audio check. Every single time I do anything, I always do an audio check and have everyone practice the technology. True story. I've been using GoToWebinar myself as a presenter since 2012. Well, there was an iOS Apple update, and you can no longer use GoToWebinar as a panelist with Google Chrome because it does not allow you to share your screen. Well, this is why you do a practice, folks, because you want to make sure that you know those weird tech issues that may arise. It's really actually important. Tech dress rehearsals are actually really important because things change on you moment to moment, and there's always tech issues that are going to happen. Do a practice and a run through, because you never know what will happen, right? Somebody sends you a slide and they add music to it, and the music sounds terrible, but maybe you don't know that maybe you don't know what the music is supposed to sound like, right? These are things that you need to be thinking about in advance, all right? So a tech prep, you always want to do an internet speed test, okay? You always want to perhaps unplug and restart your router if necessary. Oh, also check for laptop and application updates. We know sometimes that updates on a laptop can take a very long time. Well, if you have an event and your laptop is updating and it is taking 8 hours and you are using your laptop for the event, you will not be actually able to use your laptop. So I always say do updates and installs in the evening before your event, at least 24 hours. And then you also want to make sure to close all applications and restart the laptop just to free up any memory. I always think it's really important to turn off your laptop the night before an event, especially if you are doing a really large one. During the event, you want to keep a pulse of what is happening. Monitor lines of communication. So let's say you're doing a gala and you have donors that always email you to a certain email address. You can guarantee that they may email you during the event to a certain email account and expect you to respond to it, right? The way in which people typically communicate is how they actually might communicate when there is a tech issue, even if you say respond and write in the chat box, right? It's just something to be thinking about. Respond to any tech questions from attendees. We've been doing that today. There's been some folks who couldn't hear because they didn't know how to turn on their own audio, and we provide that type of support. That's actually really important. Is you need to be able to tell people how to turn their audio on based on the type of laptop they have or the device that they're using, right? Very important. You need to be able to run polls, do breakout rooms, manage the chat box. Your presenters and speakers can't do that, right? You can't be leading the content and also be managing the technology. I compare it to when you used to have your networking breakfast or your gala event. You can't be serving the food and also leading the speech, right? You cannot do more than one thing at a time. It is too hard. So you need to have a welcome. I modeled the welcome, right? Include the event information, title of the event, your organization. Maybe it's a welcome slide. Maybe you have some music. Review logistics. Maybe that's done via email in advance. Maybe that's also in the chat box, right? Maybe it's on a slide. Have a welcome slide that goes along with a script. If you have a speaker who is speaking on behalf of your organization, you need to make sure to supply them with a script, especially if they've never done a virtual event before. They are not going to know what to say. It is actually very important. And then let people know how to ask questions and how to use the chat and question box if it's necessary. I already called out a few times and said, folks can't see the chats, only I can. And then I also said, if you have a tech support issue, type it in the chat. And then I also said, if you're using a mobile phone, GoTo is not very friendly. Now, I would never tell somebody to use GoTo if you're doing a gala or a fundraiser, because guarantee most folks who go to galas and fundraisers typically log in from their tablets or their phones sometime, right? That's why I said you got to choose a platform that aligns with your audience. How to avoid common pitfalls, because they happen. All right, have a plan. I've talked about the importance of a plan. This is not your gala or networking breakfast that you've done for the last 15 years, right? You don't know what's going to happen until you do it, until you've practiced, until you've created a plan, until you've had a tech dress rehearsal, until you actually know what the virtual event is going to be like. Don't cram an in-person event into the online format. It won't work. All right. You really have to design for online. And then we always tell the folks whose events we are supporting, because we do tech support, online events are not TV, right? What is your internet speed and your guest internet speed? Do you know their internet speed, right? Because your guest and your presenters and your speakers and everybody who is participating, the viewing will depend on their internet speed and yours. All right, so that's actually really important. Audio issues will happen. Oh, they will happen. And sometimes they're user error. So when you are having tech support, the tech support has to manage the user error and know how to support the users, especially if you have VIP donors or if you have presenters or speakers or panelists. You need to make sure to know all the different issues that may arise. All right. And typically, the more you do online events, the more likely you will know what issues will arise. You do need to know how to walk people through their audio issues. And sometimes you can suggest switching people from computer audio to a headphone or using a call-in number. There's always a call-in number available. Now, presenters, you need to make sure that you can actually hear presenters. So that's why you do a tech check, test their microphones, have them log in early, do a sound check. Nobody wants to listen to somebody when it sounds like they're in a tunnel, right? And make sure, folks, that your presenters don't change something on you right before the live event. We have had that happen before, or we do a sound check and then they plug in a microphone and nobody can hear because that's not how we did the sound check, right? So very important, because humans are not robots and we do things that we don't expect may cause an issue, right? So internet issues. Oh, these are always a problem, right? So if your presenter or staff have a slow internet connection, they probably should go off webcam. Maybe close out all the other applications, right? Turn off other devices, maybe call in from a phone, potentially do a pre-record option if possible, right? These are just things that you always have to be thinking about. I think a mix between pre-record and live is actually really important. So just something to think about. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone joining us for this webinar. If folks have questions, please feel free to type them in. We can provide tech support for events. We can do a variety of support services in advance of an event, from a run of show template to planning meetings, presenter one-on-one preps, event design, curation, tech dress rehearsals, and video editing. And the day of the event, we can also provide tech support, managing breakout rooms and chats and polls and supporting presenters and playing videos and sharing screens and dealing with all the tech support issues that may arise in the moment that you least expect, right? So closing time, let's review a few important things. Curate for online and not in person, all right? Take a deep breath and acknowledge. Not everything is going to go as planned. This is not the event that you have planned for the last 15 years and got the issues out in the first 5 years, all right? Just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And really practice. Practice with your team and sort of know what is happening and what you want to have as part of your event and your plan and in your run of show. And please practice and really have a script. Choose the right platform for what you're trying to achieve. Okay, just because I'm using GoTo right now does not mean you use GoTo for your gala. I already said if you want to do breakout rooms, well, you can't use GoToWebinar, right? So you've got to align your platform with your event. So I see a lot of good questions coming in, and I'm going to start answering them as right now as they're coming in. So how do you check internet speed? I like to do an internet speed check at internetspeedtest.net. All right. So I usually Google internet speed test, and then what pops up is internetspeedtest.net. And that's how we do it. And it will tell you what your internet speed is in some sort of form of a number, which really makes no sense to you unless you actually know something about bandwidth. But why I love it is it says your internet is very fast. You can do the following things: stream 4 videos at once. And then if you see your internet is fast or your internet is slow, then you probably cannot do a lot of things that you want to do. And then if your internet speed is not so good, you are likely going to need to increase your internet bandwidth and pay more, or you probably don't have the capability to run a large Zoom event on your own and you might need to bring in tech support. That's something to think about. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and you will get the slides and the recording to your email. All right, somebody asked if we could share some information about breakout rooms. So this is sort of the issue, is that we can only share and model and explain a platform that we are in right now. We are more than happy to explain details about breakout rooms offline. One of the things that I will say is that we typically, our rule of thumb is if you have 15 people or more at an event and you're doing breakout rooms, you need somebody else to manage and support you with the breakout rooms. It's too hard to lead the content, right? If you're facilitating a meeting or you're running a focus group and you're doing this on Zoom and you have to send people to breakout rooms and you need to have certain people in the breakout rooms, it is too hard to lead the content yourself and also do the breakout room. So that's something to be thinking about. Thank you all so much. If folks have any other questions, please feel free to send a follow-up email. We are going to send the recordings and the slides. We appreciate you learning with us, and thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up. If you need more assistance with your virtual galas, fundraisers, convenings, please feel free to reach out. And we do thank you for learning with us. We know that you have lots of places to learn, and we thank you for learning with us. And we are going to close out this webinar.